Today's story is going to be about the Sosoliso Airlines that crash landed in Port Harcourt, the River State's capital, some 18 years ago. Today, 10th December 2005. What a story. Flight 1145 was carrying 103 passengers and 7 crew members. The majority of those on board were children aged between 12 and 16 years old who were traveling home for Christmas. On a day like this, the 10th of December in 2005, 18 years ago.
My name is Kechi Okuchi and I survived a plane crash. I sustained third-degree burns over 65% of my body. All these people had died and I just felt so heavy. So I made a decision while in that hospital bed that I would spend my life living as fully as possible. That was the best way for me to keep the memories of those that passed away.
Among the passengers were about 60 secondary school students from Loyola Jesuit College in the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. At first, Loyola Jesuit College students from Port Harcourt traveled between school and their homes via buses using the roads. Rising crime along roads during the 1990s, however, made parents believe that road travel was too dangerous in 2001. When Sosoliso Airlines began services between Port Harcourt and Abuja, parents placed their children on the flight. Also on the flight were 2 volunteers for Medicines Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, one of whom was an American and the other was a French citizen, en route to work in Port Harcourt, as well as televangelist Bimbo Odukoya, pastor of the Fountain of Life Church, the national president of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasin, Uche Marcus Okoro, who was returning from a union meeting, was also on the passenger list. The captain was Benjamin Adekunle Adebayo, a 48-year-old Nigerian with a total flying experience of 10,050 hours, with 1,900 of them on the DC-9. He had his first simulator training at Pan Am International Flight Academy in Miami on 7th of July 2005. The first officer was Gerard Yakubu Andan, a 33-year-old Ghanaian with a total flying experience of 920 hours, which 670 hours were on the type. He had his last simulator training in August 2005 with a result of satisfying. Flight 1145 was a scheduled domestic passenger flight from Nigeria's capital Abuja to Port Harcourt, the capital of Rivers State. The aircraft departed from Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport at 12:25 p.m. with 103 passengers and 7 crew members, with Captain Adebayo, 48, as the pilot who was in control of the aircraft and First Officer Anden as his co-pilot. The flight was uneventful until his final approach in Port Harcourt. About 140 kilometers, 90 miles from the airport, the aircraft contacted controller for initial descent clearance and was cleared by controller to descend to 4,900 meters, that is about 16,000 feet. The aircraft continued its descent until 13. When the crew asked the controller for the weather condition at the airport, the controller told the crews that there was no precipitation in the area. The crew acknowledged the report and continued their descent. At 11 kilometers from the airport on 13:04 p.m., the aircraft had been established on the glide slope. At this time, the aircraft had entered adverse weather condition with headwind and tailwind. Flight crews then requested clearance to land at runway 21. The controller then contacted Flight 1145 and advised that there was a possibility of rain in the airport. The controller then cleared the aircraft to land at runway 21, but warned the pilots that the runway could be slightly wet, indicating that hydroplaning was a possibility. The flight crews then acknowledged this message. Flight 1145 then descended until it had passed the decision altitude of 307 feet. As the rain intensified, the visibility deteriorated. The unlit runway further aggravated the situation. Unable to make out the unlit runway through the rain, Captain Adebayo called for a go-round missed approach at an altitude of about 200 feet. Or approximately 120 feet above the ground. This call was made about 100 feet below the decision altitude. His decision, however, was too late as Flight 1145 was already too low for a go-round. The too low gear warning then sounded, and the flight crews tried to add more thrust. The flight crews had not managed to prepare the aircraft's configuration in a timely manner, and the aircraft kept descending. The DC-9 then slammed onto the grass strip between the runway and the taxiway. It then slid and struck a concrete drainage culvert located near the runway. The collision then disintegrated the aircraft. The tail section was immediately destroyed and the engine was launched into the drainage. As it broke up, the fuel spilled and the aircraft burst into flames. The fuselage and the cockpit, now in flames, continued to slide for a few hundred meters before it finally came to rest on the taxiway. Of the 103 passengers and 7 crew members, there were only 2 survivors, although 7 survivors were initially rescued. Many passengers survived the initial impact but died in the resulting fire. Other passengers later died from their injuries. Port Harcourt Airport had 1 fire truck and no ambulances. None of the 7 crew members survived the crash. Out of the 60 teenagers from the Ignatius Loyal Jesuit College, a boarding school located in Abuja, 59 were killed, with Kechi Okuchi being the only survivor from her school. Kechi was treated at Mill Park Hospital in Johannesburg, South Africa, and at Shriners Hospitals for Children in Galveston, Texas, United States. The other survivor was Bumia Muso, who survived with 40% burns on her body. Kechi has been telling her story about what happened on the day. Listen to what she says.
Life before the accident was a lot of fun. I grew up in Nigeria, which is my home country, and I spent my first 16 years there. When I started high school, which was a boarding school, I made a lot of friends there that have become lifelong friends. I was a really good-looking teenager and I was aware of it, so obviously I had a lot of confidence from that. I was traveling home for the Christmas holidays with 60 other students from my high school in Abuja, Nigeria. Once the descent started, that was when everything kind of started to get crazy. It started with just a few bumps here and there and just some turbulence, but then eventually it became very extreme and people started to freak out, and that was when we realized that something was wrong. I remember there was a lot of screaming and chaos. I never got a chance to feel anything further than that shock. Before I knew it, there was this like loud metal scraping sound, and that's literally the last thing I remember before I blacked out. I was kept in the South African hospital in Johannesburg for 7 months. I sustained 3rd-degree burns over 65% of my body, which means everything from my scalp to my toes burned except for my torso. So my tummy, my back, these are the areas they took skin from to cover up the major areas of my body that burned. I learned the truth about how many people survived the accident 4 months into my treatment. I was so confused because up until that moment I had assumed that everyone was okay. It's like I'm never going to see my friends again that were on that plane. I realized like the last time I saw them was the last time, period.
Weather data was obtained from the Nigerian Meteorological Agency and from satellite imagery that were provided by Boeing. The data suggested that at 1 p.m., a sea breeze front, possibly reinforced by an outflow, pushed inland in the vicinity of Port Harcourt. This condition caused a rapidly deteriorating visibility during Flight 1145's approach to the airport. The leading edge of the boundary, in theory, also could have caused an abrupt increase in wind speed and significant changes on the direction of the wind, which would produce wind shear. According to the AIB, the weather information was not relayed to the flight crews in a correct manner. The controller did not relay the wind speed and the possibility of a thunderstorm in the area. Had the controller relayed the information properly, the crew would have prepared the aircraft according to the said weather condition. The controller should have asked the crews to be vigilant on the prevailing wind condition. However, the controller had only cleared the aircraft to land and to exercise caution on the wet runway. Further investigation revealed that Sosoliso Airlines didn't include wind shear recognition and recovery into its simulator training program. As the flight recorders were retrieved by investigators, it was revealed that both flight recorders had been damaged by the impact forces and post-impact fire. The recorders were later taken to the United Kingdom for further analysis by the Air Accident Investigation Branch. The flight data recorder revealed that during Flight 1145's final approach, the aircraft had passed the decision altitude of Port Harcourt Airport. The decision altitude is the exact altitude where pilots need to find the runway by visual reference until a certain point, where the pilot decides to make a call for a go-round when visual contact with the runway has not been established. Flight 1145 leveled off at an altitude of 204 feet, which was below the minimum decision altitude of 307 feet. The airspeed then decreased to 145 knots, and the aircraft kept descending even lower than 204 feet. A few seconds later, there was an increase of speed to 151 knots, indicating that the flight's crews had decided to initiate a go-round. As the aircraft had descended well below 204 feet, the crew was unable to recover the aircraft as the altitude was too low. The data then ceased functioning when the aircraft speed was at 160 knots. The cockpit voice recorder revealed that Captain Adebayo had called for a go-round approximately 16 seconds before the crash. Called for a go-round, the flight crews added thrust and then tried to retract the gear and the flaps, as the flaps had not been completely retracted and the gears were not in its correct position. According to the correct procedures for a missed approach, the flight crews should have set the takeoff thrust, retracted the flaps to 15 degrees, and retracted the landing gear until the positive rate of climb had been established. The flight crews did try to follow the procedure. However, the low altitude of Flight 1145 added by the bad weather condition at the time prevented the flight crews to conduct a proper missed approach procedure. Flight 1145 was flying slightly above its stall speed, and the wind shear condition caused the airspeed to decrease. As such, the aircraft didn't climb in a timely manner, ultimately crashed onto the ground. The final report was published on July 26, 2006. The Nigerian Accidental Investigation Bureau concluded that the probable cause of the crash was due to the crew's decision to continue the approach beyond the decision altitude without having the runway in sight. The adverse weather condition was listed as a contributing factor. The Nigerian AIB recommended that wind shear recognition and recovery should be made compulsory. The Nigerian AIB recommended that wind shear recognition and recovery should be made compulsory into pilots and recurrence simulator training. This was not applied in a timely manner and resulted in another airliner crash a year later in Abuja, which was caused by wind shear. This is remembering the Sosoliso crash that took away over 100 lives in Nigeria. The Sosoliso Airlines that crash landed in Port Harcourt, the Rivers State's capital, some 18 years ago. Today, 10th December 2005. What a story. What a life.